And hello everyone, welcome back to another C++ tutorial. So in this tutorial, we are going to be talking about arrays. Now there are a lot to talk about with arrays, but for this tutorial, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. Arrays are basically like a variable, but a variable that could store more than one value. For example, let's say we have an int x. Int x can store 10. However, we cannot store another number inside of this variable. It can only store one item. Same with if we went int y, that can keep x, but we cannot add another variable or another value to y. They can only store one item. So let's create our first array then, to show you what it does. I'm going to go here and say r, so int r for array. Then in here you say how many items you want to store. In this case, let's say 5. Now, here we can just say equal to, and then we have these little brackets here. These brackets basically say what we want to store inside of the array. For example, we can say 5, 7, 9, 0, 2. This is 5 items. This array is able to store more than one item. If we were to have another integer here, int x, and make that equal to 10, we can actually say x there. This is 100% valid. Because remember, this is just a container. Whether we say x here or not, it's just basically going to spit out 10. Anyhow, so this will allow us to store 5 items in the array. Let's see what happens if we want to print out the array. R. Now I'm going to compile this. And as you see, we get this weird value right here. This is basically like the location of the array in your RAM. Because we can't just get the entire array. We need to do a few things before we can actually work with the array. And we can actually go about displaying all the items in the array in a next tutorial. But right now we can work with displaying one item in the array. So arrays start at index 0. Like that. So in these brackets here, you can specify an index, basically which one you want. In this case, let me just do this. This would be index 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the indexes. It starts at 0, so 0 will give us 5, because that's what we stored at index 0. You can see we get 5. If we want, let's say 0, then we can use index 3. Do that, it works. And if we want to get something at index 5, which doesn't exist, what will happen? We'll get a value like this. You don't have to worry too much about it. Just know that if you're going to specify an item higher than what we have, it's going to throw out something you don't want. Now, you don't always want to specify the number in here for how long it will be, because let's say this is going to be 20, but you just see 20 items in a list of things you need to add, and you don't want to count all 20 of them. So what you can do is you can say this. This means make this array the size of the amount of items in here. So as you can see, currently it's still R5 because there's just 5 items in here. But now I can add more things in here. So 6 or 8, another 0, 12, 23. Now the array is 9 because there's now 9 items in here. So if we run this, it will still work perfectly, and 5 now contains the value 8. However, if we were to make that 2, then you'll notice my editor already sees that this isn't going to work out, because there's only supposed to be 2 items in here. So you don't have to worry about if you specify too low and you enter your stuff in here, it's just going to throw an error once you try to compile it. Now, what if you want to get the length of the amount of items in an array? I'm going to say size of, so what we talked about yesterday, And let's actually just say size of R. And let's make this 2 items only. And I actually also want to size of int. Let's see the size of both of them. You'll notice R is double the size of int. But you'll also notice if I add more items in here, you'll notice it's much bigger than what it was. Because here it was 8, but now it's 24. Well, arrays work like this. For every item in the array, it's going to store that amount it needed for that specific data type. So in this case, an integer only needs 4 bytes. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. That's how we got here. So this stores a total of 24 bytes. So it will take 24 bytes from your RAM to store this array. Now let's say we want to get the length of this array, the amount of items inside of it. We currently know the amount of items is 6, but sometimes you need to access that amount inside of your code. And C++ does not have an inbuilt method as far as I know to do this. So what you have to do is say size of array divided by size of, and there's 2 things you can put in here. The first one is pointer A. You don't need to know what a pointer is, or point R I mean. So pointer and then this right here, the variable, the array itself. Now you don't need to know what a pointer is yet. A pointer to you is something you don't have to care about. And then you have your array. Now this right here, if we run this, it will give us 6. And yep, we have 6 items in here. Now if you don't want to work with pointers, which most beginners don't, and I'm not going to explain what a pointer is to you just yet because it's too early, you can also use the first element in the array. This will also give you the same output. And you can add as many things in here as you like, you'll get the same output. And I should actually add my comments and stuff as it should be added. There we go. Now if we run this, we'll get our new size, which is 11. Now arrays can become way more complex than this. For example, one thing I like to do when creating, let's say, is it tic-tac-toe? Is that what the game is called? But basically where you have your X and then you have your 0 and then you have your X and then someone might have put a 0 there and then you have your X and then you have another 0. And then on the next line, you might have a 0 and a 0 and then an X. And in this guy, the X would win this game. I think that's called tic-tac-toe. Don't really know. But one thing you can do with an array to do this is you can create a multi-dimensional array. This is what I love to use when working or when creating that game. So here we can say int tic, and this is for tic-tac-toe basically. Of course, you can specify your sizes here. For example, 3 and then 3. Then that is equal to an array. And the thing is, this array needs to have 3 arrays inside of it. So now we can have another array in here, and let's say 1, 2, 0. Let's go like this, copy this. And in here we can say 1, 2, maybe here 0 as well. And then maybe 2, 1, and then there's another 2 there. So this is an example of what you can do. Now this is basically an array within an array. So first you specify the amount of items in this array. And in this case you'll notice there's 3 items. Then you specify how many items are in those arrays, like this. So in this case, if we were to think of tic-tac-toe, 1 could be X, 2 could be the circle, and 0 could be an empty space. And X1 because there's an X like that. Now let's actually try and display some items from this array. So cout. Now if we're just going to print out tic, let's see what we get. We get a memory space. That's understandable. But let's say you want to print out the item from this item in the array. So that will be 1, because remember, arrays start at index 0. This is index 0. This is index 1. This is index 2. We're getting index 1. What do we get? Or another memory location. Now, we can do something like 1. And in this case, this means go to the first index, 0, 1. And inside of that, go to its first index. So 0, then 1. In this case, let's actually make it 2 and then 1, because then we'll get 2. So now it's 0, 1, and then 2. That's what we're saying here. And then 1. So then 0 and then 1. Now if we were to print this out, we'll get 2. If we were to make this 2, we'll get 1, because this 1 is at the end. If we were to make this 0, then we'll get 2, because 2 is at index 0. You can also make this different sizes if you want. So in this case, you can make it 2 as well. And then you can just do this. Now, there's 3 items in this array, but every item in the array can only have 2 items. You can do the same as what you do with a normal array, where you can do this and specify not a value. But this inner array needs to have a value specified. Because you don't want one array with this and then another array with more than that. You don't want that. You want them all to be the same. You can get around this, and in the future I will tell you how to get around this. But right now you don't need to know how to. And yeah, that is the basics of arrays. We'll be working with more of arrays, so if you're still not quite sure what arrays are or how they work, you don't have to worry too much about it, because we will be working a bit with them in the future. Just note that an array is basically a data type that can store other data types, but more than one. So with int x, you can only store one item in it. With string x, you can only store one string in it. With bool x, you can only store one boolean in it. But with an array, it's so much better. For example, we can say bool yeah, and we can say 20. Oh, not 20, just let's get 2. Now here we can be like true, true, and false. So now we have a boolean array that can store more than one boolean. And my bad, I'm used to using brackets for that. There we go. Squiggly brackets. And you can even increase this. So now let's say it's 4. Now I can go false, false. So yeah, that is the power of arrays. They allow you to store multiple stuff inside of an array. When do you want to use an array though, above an actual variable? Well, let's say you have a situation where you need to declare a bunch of variables. So int x is equal to 20, or yeah, 20. Int y is equal to 50. Int z is equal to 32. And this will happen more often than you'd think. Then what you can do, instead of having to create a variable every time you need it, because sometimes you'll need lots of variables. Like, I'm not kidding you. Then instead of doing that, you can just create one array to store all of those values for you. Because then you won't have 20 variables, you'll have one array with 20 items inside of it. And you can access those items with these brackets. That's when you should try and use it. And yeah, that is arrays. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next C++ tutorial.